Could the last 90 days be part of a plan, a political scenario? Let me ask you a question. In the last 3 months, 3 men disappeared from the global stage. 3 powerful figures, 3 different continents, 3 events that on the surface appear completely unrelated. In Venezuela, a leader who had ruled for over a decade. In Mexico, a figure at the top of the cartel world. In Iran, a supreme leader who controlled an entire nation. All gone, within 90 days. Coincidence? Or is there something we're not being told? Today I'm going to walk you through a scenario, not as fact, as possibility. I'm going to connect 3 dots that the media has kept separate, and I'm going to ask you to consider whether what we've been watching is random chaos or a carefully executed plan. This is not journalism. This is speculation. But it's speculation built on observable patterns, documented timelines, and questions that nobody in power seems willing to answer. Let's start at the beginning. Event 1. Venezuela, December 2025. Nicolás Maduro had been Venezuela's president since 2013, 12 years. He survived protests, coup attempts, international sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and assassination plots. He was a survivor, ruthless, cunning, backed by the military. And then, on December 8, 2025, he was gone. The official story is that he resigned due to health reasons, a heart condition, stress. His doctors advised him to step down. He agreed. A peaceful transition. His vice president took over. Democracy prevailed. That's the official story. But here's what else happened in the weeks before Maduro's resignation. November 15, 2025. The United States announced new sanctions targeting Venezuela's oil industry. Not the first sanctions, not even the toughest, but specific, targeted at companies and individuals close to Maduro personally. November 22, 2025. A senior Venezuelan military officer defected to Colombia. He claimed in interviews that the military was divided, that loyalty to Maduro was weakening, that generals were quietly discussing alternatives. November 28, 2025. Massive protests erupted in Caracas, larger than previous protests, better organized. The government cracked down, but not as harshly as expected. Some units refused orders to fire on protesters. December 3, 2025. A document leaked to international media, an alleged letter from senior Venezuelan military commanders to Maduro. The letter suggested, politely but firmly, that Maduro consider stepping aside for the good of the nation. December 8, 2025. Maduro resigned. Now let's ask some questions the official story doesn't answer. Who organized the protests that suddenly became more effective than years of previous demonstrations? Who convinced military commanders to write that letter? Who ensured that the defecting officers' interviews reached international media at exactly the right moment? Who applied the diplomatic pressure that made Maduro's position untenable? The official story says it was spontaneous, a popular uprising, democratic forces prevailing. Our scenario asks, what if it was coordinated? What if external actors, governments, intelligence agencies, diplomatic networks, worked behind the scenes to create the conditions that made Maduro's resignation inevitable? Not a coup, nothing so crude, just pressure, applied systematically, until the target had no choice but to step aside. Event 2. Mexico, January 2026. Ismael El Mayo Zambada had been one of the most powerful figures in the Sinaloa Cartel for decades. He was 76 years old. He had never been arrested, never been caught. He operated in the shadows while his partners, El Chapo, others, got captured or killed. He was a ghost. And then, on January 25, 2026, he walked into a private airfield in Sinaloa, boarded a small plane, and flew to Texas, where he was arrested by US authorities. The official story is that he negotiated a surrender. He was old, sick, tired. He wanted to spend his final years in a US prison rather than hiding in the mountains. A voluntary surrender by a cartel boss who decided enough was enough. That's the official story. But here's what else we know. December 2025. U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration activity in Mexico increased significantly. Multiple operations, more agents on the ground, coordination with Mexican authorities at levels not seen in years. Early January 2026. Multiple arrests of mid-level Sinaloa Cartel operatives, not random busts, targeted operations, people close to El Mayo, his logistics coordinators, his financial managers, his security personnel. January 15, 2026. A high-ranking Mexican military officer gave an interview, anonymous but verified, stating that pressure on the cartels had reached unprecedented levels and that significant developments were coming soon. January 25, 2026. El Mayo surrendered. Now let's ask what the official story doesn't explain. A 76-year-old man who had evaded capture for decades suddenly decides to surrender, just like that. Or was he given a choice? Surrender now, on negotiated terms with guarantees about sentencing and treatment, or face an operation that would end badly, for him and for his family. Our scenario suggests the latter, that El Mayo didn't surrender voluntarily. He surrendered because the pressure had become unbearable, because his network had been systematically dismantled, because staying free meant living as a hunted man with diminishing resources and protection. Not a traditional arrest, a managed surrender, negotiated, controlled, announced as voluntary to save face on all sides. Event 3. Iran, February 2026. We've already discussed this one. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, killed in a joint US-Israeli strike on February 29, 2026. The official story. Iran's nuclear program posed an imminent threat. Negotiations failed. Military action became necessary. But here's what our scenario adds to that story. Iran had 3 men who represented obstacles to US and Israeli interests in the Middle East. Khamenei was one. The others, Iran's Defense Minister Amir Nasir-Zadeh and Revolutionary Guards Commander Mohammad Pakpour. All 3 died in the same operation. Not wounded, not captured, killed. Precision strikes, high-value targets, simultaneous elimination. That doesn't happen by accident. That level of intelligence, that level of coordination, that level of execution. That requires planning, months of planning, detailed intelligence gathering, surveillance, target tracking, operational preparation. Which means the decision to kill them wasn't made on February 29th. It was made long before. The pattern emerges. So now we have 3 events, 3 timelines, 3 outcomes. December 8th, Maduro resigns. January 25th, El Mayo surrenders. February 29th, Khamenei killed. 90 days, 3 continents, 3 men removed from power. And here's where the scenario gets interesting. Because when you look at what these 3 men represented, a pattern emerges. Maduro, a hostile leader in America's backyard, an ally of Russia and China, an obstacle to US influence in Latin America. El Mayo, a cartel boss whose organization flooded the United States with drugs, contributing to the opioid crisis and destabilizing border regions. Khamenei, the leader of a nation that challenged US and Israeli interests across the Middle East. 3 obstacles, 3 problems, 3 targets, and all 3 removed within 90 days. Coincidence or coordination? The players. Our scenario now asks, who could coordinate something like this? Not openly, not publicly, but behind the scenes, through intelligence agencies, through diplomatic pressure, through military operations. The answer isn't hidden. The United States has the capability to operate simultaneously across multiple regions. The CIA, the DEA, the Pentagon, the State Department, the National Security Council, each agency operating in its domain, each pursuing its objectives, but all reporting to the same chain of command, all serving the same strategic interests. Is it possible that, sometime in late 2025, a decision was made at the highest levels of the US government to address 3 problems simultaneously? To remove Maduro through diplomatic and covert pressure, to neutralize El Mayo through law enforcement coordination, to eliminate Khamenei through military action. 3 operations, 3 timelines, 3 methods, but 1 strategy. Our scenario says yes. It's not just possible, it's probable. The 90-day timeline. Let's construct the timeline as if this were intentional. Late November 2025. Trump's national security team conducts a strategic review. They identify 3 immediate threats to US interests: Venezuela, cartels, Iran. They develop a plan. Not 1 operation, 3. Coordinated but separate, each using the method most appropriate to the target. For Maduro, pressure, sanctions, support for opposition, military defection encouragement, make his position untenable. For El Mayo, law enforcement coordination, network disruption, negotiate surrender terms, present it as voluntary. For Iran, military preparation, intelligence gathering, wait for the right moment, strike decisively. December, Venezuela operation executes, Maduro resigns. Success. January, Mexico operation executes, El Mayo surrenders. Success. February, Iran operation executes, Khamenei killed. Success. 3 months, 3 targets, 3 successes. Is that timeline provable? No. Does it fit the observable facts? Yes. The cost-benefit analysis. Now our scenario asks an uncomfortable question. If this was coordinated, if the US deliberately removed 3 hostile actors within 90 days, was it justified? Let's look at the costs. Venezuela. Maduro gone, but replaced by whom? His vice president, a member of the same party. Uncertainty about whether real change will occur. Mexico. El Mayo in custody, but the Sinaloa Cartel still exists. Leadership will be replaced. Drug flow may be disrupted temporarily, but will resume. Iran. Khamenei dead, along with thousands of Iranian civilians and military personnel. Regional instability. Potential for civil war, refugee crisis, economic disruption. Those are real costs. Now the benefits. Venezuela. Potential for democratic transition. Reduced Russian and Chinese influence in the Western Hemisphere. Possible normalization of relations. Mexico. Major cartel figure removed. Signal sent to other cartel leaders. Potential reduction in drug trafficking. Iran. Nuclear threat eliminated. Regional proxy networks disrupted. Opportunity for regime change. From a strategic perspective, the benefits might justify the costs. But from a moral perspective, from a human perspective, that's harder. The questions that remain. Our scenario has constructed a narrative, but it can't answer every question. Question 1. If this was coordinated, why hasn't anyone said so? Answer. Because covert operations remain covert. Because diplomatic pressure works best when it's not publicly acknowledged. Because taking credit for regime change creates legal and political complications. Question 2. If the US wanted Maduro gone, why not just invade Venezuela? Answer. Because regime change through pressure is cheaper, cleaner, and creates fewer long-term complications than military invasion. Question 3. If El Mayo was going to be arrested, why the elaborate surrender rather than a raid? Answer. Because a negotiated surrender reduces violence, provides intelligence value through cooperation, and creates the appearance of law enforcement success rather than military action. Question 4. If Iran was the target, why wait until February? Answer. Because timing matters. Elections, domestic politics, regional dynamics. The moment has to be right. The conclusion. So here's the scenario I've laid out for you, not as truth, as possibility. What if the last 90 days weren't random? What if 3 separate events, Maduro's resignation, El Mayo's surrender, Khamenei's death, were part of a coordinated strategy? What if the United States identified 3 threats and systematically eliminated them using the methods most appropriate to each target? I'm not claiming this happened. I'm saying the timeline fits, the methods fit, the beneficiaries fit, the pattern fits. And in geopolitics, patterns matter. Because when three obstacles to US interests disappear within 90 days, using three different methods, all achieving their objectives with minimal US casualties, that's either an extraordinary coincidence or evidence of competent strategic planning. You decide which is more likely. Maduro is gone. El Mayo is in custody. Khamenei is dead. 90 days. 3 continents. 3 successes. Coincidence or plan? End of scenario.